It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Talking Boxing with Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay. I'm joined right now with John Mosquionis from LDL TV, and we kind of have a sad show to do today because my co-host Sal Cenicola has passed away, and I wanted to remember Sal from a light that maybe a lot of you guys that have watched and been part of this show, and Sal being part of the show, and you kind of got to know Sal in a way as an analyst and a comedian and everything else. But John and I have known Sal from a much better light. So first and foremost, welcome to the show again, John. I hope things are going great.
They are. It's been a sad day here in North Florida, South Georgia this week. It's been, the community up there in St. Simons was, I'm not going to say they were in shock. He was sick a long time, but it's, the passing of a legend in South Georgia Italian food.
Yeah. When he told me he sold the place about, what it was, I guess it had to be about a year and a half ago, I was wondering about that. Have you been there since Sal, not since he passed, but since,
Yes.
he took it over?
Yeah.
And it can't possibly be the same.
Well, it is. They left it pristinely the same with all of his stuff in there. Nothing has changed at all. A family that were customers bought the business from Sal. I think it was they were big fans of Sal's. They're running it quite well, but it's exactly the same as when Sal was there. And Sal was coming in and doing some, he was making appearances there for a long time, as long as he could. I actually, my dad passed away last year. His last meal was in Sal's. Sal wasn't there because I didn't want Sal to come in and pay for the meal like he always does. My dad said, don't call Sal. He's going to come in. He's going to pay for the meal. And I'm so embarrassed. But, at that time, the family had taken it over. And but they're doing a pretty good job. But it's a really sad day up in St. Simons. It really, truly is. There's, I'm going up for the wake tomorrow at between 6 and 8. It's in the same funeral home where my dad was, where they took care of my dad, and it's in St. William's Church, the funeral, which we're going to stream on LDL TV. It'll be everywhere so that the people in New Jersey can watch it. So yeah, and I actually heard from Sal's son, Nicholas, by text. He wrote me a nice text. Sal's got two sons, Sal Jr., who is, I believe he's a senior at University of Georgia, who won pretty convincingly last night over Clemson. And he's got another son, Nicholas, who I believe is 19 or 20 years old, lives in St. Simons. And he was taken care of, by the way, very well by his ex-wife, Lisa, who really stepped up and took care of Sal all the way along the way. There was just an enormous amount of medical stuff that went on. He was in Emory Hospital for like almost 6 months. He was in a rehabilitation in St. Simons, and then he started to go downhill over the last month or so. I wanted to go see him a couple times, and he didn't answer his phone. And then 2 weeks ago, I was going to go see him, and I got a cold. I didn't have COVID, but I got a cold, and I said to Lisa, God, I don't want to go up there. I'm coughing, and I'm sick, and I don't want to go up there and see him. And she said, no, don't worry about it. He's going to be all right. He's going to be all right. And then she texted me on Monday night and said he's in really bad shape. And then I got an email from you and a bunch of other people, Eric Botcher and a lot of people in the boxing business. You know how it is in the boxing business. The word travels fast. And I called the hospice, and they actually put him on the phone with me. And I was able to talk with him, and he wasn't able to talk. He whispered something to me. I just told him, hey, man, I love you. And then he about 4 or 5 hours later, he passed away. So it's been a tough week, man. It's just been tough. The guy was just, as you know, full of energy. I went to, he had a birthday party about a year ago that we went to. I did a music video, which it turned into a tribute video, which is up there on all the Facebook and everywhere else to him. And I think the community's a little bit in shock. I mean, it was Sal was a integral part of that St. Simon's community there. You were there, especially when we went to promote the fight. Sal was a guy full of energy. Everybody knew him. Everywhere you went, anytime I went anywhere with him, I mean, we went to the barbecue place one time to eat. He wanted to go eat, and it's just you'd think he owned the place. Everybody that walked in and out of the barbecue, Sal,
Yeah, he was something, and a lot of those events, and we did a lot through LDL TV at Sal's place. I mean, Sal, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but Sal made all of that happen out of his own pocket, and it was interesting because what you just said, how everybody treated him and looked up to him, and the one knock when I used to always bitch at him about it was, I'm like, Sal, ask some of these people for sponsorship, and he wouldn't do it. Remember how he would never do it. He would rather whip out a checkbook and pay for things himself without asking. And I'm sure that he would have gotten support even during his fight and during the other events we did at his place, which were all, I mean, come on. How did we even pull those off, John? I mean, when you think of it.
I want to just tell you a couple good stories on a good note for Sal. Just, I know you remember this because on the week of that fight, and by the way, that was the first, I was in the boxing promotion business with Don King for 19 years, but I had my own area I was in, accounts receivable, and it was a big organization. But I took on promoting that fight, and you were down there for it, and you watched it, and that was the first and last fight I'll ever promote. The amount of pressure that's on you to promote a fight. But anyways, the week of the fight, you were down, and we did a show, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 nights out in front of Sal's. And one day I was running around, my stomach was, I could barely even eat, but we were in Sal's every single day. And there was one day I sat there and my mom and dad, my mom's still alive, but my dad was still alive then too, obviously. And I said to you, hey, we're at Sal's, we're sitting at the bar. And I said, hey man, I got to go run and do all these couple of errands. And if you want to come to my parents' house, to my mom's house, you can. I don't know what she's going to make for lunch or whatever, but whatever it is. And you looked, and Sal turned around. He was at the bar, and it was in the afternoon. It was like maybe noon or something. And Sal said, "Billy, what do you want to eat?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Well, it's my mom's house or Sal's." And he looked around. He said, "No offense, bro, but I'm staying here at Sal's." So cut to about 3 hours later, and Billy C's sitting back at the bar, and he's holding his belly, and he's leaning back. He's going, "Oh, I can't eat another thing. I had what was it? I had 3 slices of pizza. I had a stromboli. I had this. I can't even eat another thing." Sal says, "What else you want?" And he said, No. I got to go, Sal. I got to give up. I can't eat anymore. And I just said to myself, and that was just Sal. There's an article today, yesterday, and if you can read it, by a gentleman that was for a radio station there locally. I don't remember. I remember his face. I don't remember his name. I just read it again. And he said the charm of that place was that the tables were close together, so it made you feel like you were in an Italian family eating dinner. Now, I was married to an Italian girl for a little while, short, about that much, and that's the way it was at her house. The family was all there, and everybody was sitting around eating. And that's my favorite restaurant of all time. I'll never have another restaurant that I love more than that place. All the times that we worked there and did stuff, but the atmosphere, every time I went in, Sal was singing on the microphone, and then he would embarrass me by saying, "This is my manager, and he made my dream come true." And it was kind of funny, but it was kind of embarrassing too. And then he'd point to the Guinness Book of World Records thing the certificate that I got. I think I got it for him. I applied for it and got it, and then he, and it was kind of embarrassing. And then he paid for dinner every time, which I went in there with my parents a couple times, and my dad was so embarrassed. My dad was so embarrassed one time. My dad gave me a bunch of cash, said, "Pay for that meal. Don't let him pay for it." And Sal came over and he goes, "Don't give me any money." So it was like $150. So I gave the $150 to the waitress. I didn't tell my dad because my dad was so uncomfortable. He didn't want to feel like he wasn't paid for it. And Sal, of course, that's the way he was. He wanted. When we came in, we were treated like royalty. Every time we went there, he treated us like royalty. We brought him back to the boxing business, and he did his thing. And and I was always I was a little embarrassed, when he'd introduce me and do stuff like that. But it was truly the best, warmest place. And I've been back there a couple times. I had the last meal with my dad before he passed away. He came back to St. Simon's and he died a couple of months. My dad was good. He said, "Let's go to Sal's." My dad would say, my mom didn't like it because she thought it was too crowded in there. I met my mom. It's too crowded in here. It's all that. I said, "But my mom, that's the charm." My dad would say, "Let's go to Sal's. Let's go to Sal's." So we snuck there a bunch of times. Then he had his last meal there. He drank 2 Peronis, and I didn't call Sal because he told me, "Please don't call Sal. He's going to come. He's going to pay for lunch. I don't want him to do it." I said, "Okay, Dad." And when I told Sal later, I said, "Hey, Sal, we were in there. We ate." And he goes, "Oh, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" I said, No. My dad was he didn't want you to pay for lunch. He was embarrassed about that. But I've got nothing but great memories. I think about that place and the food and the smell and the Frank Sinatra playing and Sal with the microphone and look I remember you saying to me before you ever went there, "I'll be the judge of that." And I was talking about pizza. I'm like, I'm not a New York guy. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, but I'm not a New York City guy, so I'm no expert on it. I said, "But it's the best thing I've ever had." He said, "I'll be the judge of that. I'll be the judge of that." And then a couple, you've been there for a while, and you go, "This is pretty good pizza."
The first time. So when I first, I think that's the first time I met Sal in person. Well, we went down there for something, and he was ready for me. You must have said something to him.
Oh yeah.
About the pizza, right? So he comes out. I never said nothing. Like, I didn't order anything. Or the only thing was I always said, "Well, I'm gonna, my test for pizza was just a plain. Just give me a plain pizza." And I didn't know anything about the backstory of that place, John, and that's the truth. And he brought out that first slice. The first slice, the first of many. But he brought out that first pie, right? And the first bite, I just went, "Oh my God, this is it!" Top 3 pizza that I ever had in my life was one of Sal's. And then he goes to tell me what people don't know is, first of all of the recipes were family recipes that he had. That's number one. Number two. All of his ingredients were top notch. He imported stuff, and I could tell right away with the cheese, right? But the most important piece of the whole puzzle, which I never knew, was that the oven. Remember, he had it dismantled.
Yes.
An old pizza place with an old brick oven. He had it dismantled and shipped. That monstrosity shipped to Long Island down there. Yeah. So, I mean, it was
$60,000 he spent on that oven. Used.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, listen, it made me think. Remember Sal when he was making pizzas and he had that stick with the boxing glove? Yeah. At the end of I forget what they call them, that you flip into pizza.
Yeah.
Doing it, and he's doing head movements
like that.
Well, he's, and you mentioned about the work atmosphere there with the singing and all of that stuff. And it was like clockwork. I used to love watching the waitresses. Like, they just knew it. I mean, it was just like that same thing over and over. Then once you created the and he wasn't a technological genius, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but
he did a zero on a piece of on a spiral notebook. You remember?
Yeah. Well, the first time I remember saying to him, "Dude, I'll hook you up with QuickBooks. You can save hours of time." And the first time I ever went into his office, I was amazed. You remember the office? Like there was a path through all that stuff. He was a pack rat, and there was a path through all that. There was his desk stacked with shit on there. I mean, it was like unbelievable. And he's like, "Oh, sit down. Where? And he never got rid of anything. And we had such a good time with all those events. And what people don't understand, I know, a lot of listeners had come down and been part of those events and what have you, but. The complexity of doing it, because remember he would never want to give up the night, the business, right?
No.
Like, oh, you can have this table out here, whatever, and people would be coming in, and we got a lot of attention, and about introducing. He always embarrassed the hell out of me because he would say to these people that don't know a left hook from a fish hook, "This is Billy C. Traveled all the way from New York to come down here," and it was just like, oh, they're like trying to be polite. "Oh, hey, nice to meet you," and it's like, who the hell's this guy? It's just
those fight night specials, though. We had 585,000 viewers on the night of the Pacquiao Mayweather. I made the mistake of putting a phone number up there, a Skype line. And
it blew our Skype out. Remember, we couldn't.
I had to shut it off. Yeah. There was so many people, but I mean, and we had we had a few people there. There was Michael Moore was there, and was it Plexico Burris? Wasn't he there?
Yeah, Plexico Burris was there,
and
we were all making fun of him because he was out of jail from shooting himself in the leg.
Shooting himself in the leg, right? Yeah, but so those fight night specials were great, and Sal really loved that stuff. It was a lot of work, and he, just like you said, he would rather write a check than ask somebody for a sponsor. When we did his fight, he didn't want to sell any tickets. I said to him, "Sal, you realize you could sell like a ton of tickets if you just offered them." And I realized quickly that he didn't want to he had this thing still from the 1980s that
he had his whole outfit that he wore. Remember, he came out. He wore that was his stuff.
Retro shorts, as you said,
right?
Retro shorts. But he didn't want to sell any tickets. He still wanted to be that star boxer that tickets, people just bought tickets because it was him. And I had a guy stationed. I had to go do a lot of work to sell 250 or 300 tickets there. It was a lot. I had to hire a kid to sit out in front, and he let the kid sit out in front, and the kid sold a couple hundred tickets or whatever. But Sal didn't want to recruit any sponsorship. He didn't want to sell any tickets. And what I always joke with Sal at the end. I said, "You were such an old Italian guy, an old Italian soul." I said, he came late to the fight. He missed the fighter meeting, and he got fined. Remember that? And Frank Gentile was pissed, and he said, "Sal." And Sal, like the old Italian soul he is, he puts his hand in his back pocket and he pulls out a wad of hundreds and fifties, and he goes, "How much is it, Frank?" And Frank goes, "50. And I look at Frank, and Frank looks at me like this was some kind of crazy joke. And Sal gets to the bottom of a pile this thick and peels off a 50, and he goes, "Does that work?" And Frank goes, "Yeah, that works, Sal. Go get in the locker room and get dressed." and Sal thought, I said, "Sal, do you even remember doing that?" He goes, Yeah, I do." I go, "That was just prototypical Sal move right there."
Yeah, no. Hey, listen, Alex Papali is here. I'm going to have him join us as well. We got all three of us on here. But geez, I see you two guys. I don't see my face all of a sudden, But
you got to move over, man.
Yeah. Oh, wrong way. But yeah, what's up? What's up, Alex? Oh, we can't hear you, Alex. Oh wait, maybe because I gotta do that.
I'm sorry. I had muted when I was backstage. I wasn't sure. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
We're reminiscing about a guy that will be sorely missed. I know you never got a chance to meet Sal in person, but John and I are reminiscing. It was quite the scene every time. You know what, John? There was never just a simple visit with Sal. It was always something extravagant. I remember him taking me for a ride in his car, right? And we're going to the radio station. We're doing something at the radio station, and he's driving in the car, and I'm going, "Oh, Sal, you You smell that exhaust, right? Because he had an exhaust leak coming into the car. You're right. It was an Alfa Romero.
Yeah.
And he looks at me with a serious face. He goes, I always get tired when I'm driving this car. I'm like, Sal, you get tired because you friggin', oh man, it was funny shit, funny stuff.
Well, I'm sitting here laughing when I was listening to hear the story about the wad of cash and the payoff there. That was great, paying the fine.
Yeah, well, it was $50 fine, but Sal, you know what? Listen, and John, you know this. Sal cherished that whole thing. And what a lot of people don't know is he actually hurt his shoulder before that fight and didn't tell anybody. I mean, it's so different. And how ironic was it? Because that kind of gave him his first loss. It was an injury that he fought through. And we always compared, his era and what it was like to, fight and not back out and all these things compared to today. And I mean, he did it right to the end, really. I mean,
he did. I mean, that guy was a warrior. I went to see him a couple times, and he was sick as hell. He was. I did an interview with him, which I posted on his Facebook page, where he's talking about his pizza, and he was feeling a lot better, but he was pretty emotional. This is right after he had the first chemotherapy, and but I could tell that he was just. He suffered a lot, and he was such a man, he wouldn't complain about it. But I know that he suffered terribly, and he wasn't going to give up. I talked with him pretty regularly, like once a week or so for the last couple of years. He just wasn't answering his phone the last month and a half or so, and understandably. But the guy was a real man, and throughout this, there were occasions where we would have long existential discussions about his career. When he met Carl King that time in '87, had he signed with Don King? And I said, look, Don King would have preserved you, a white, good-looking Italian guy that's undefeated. Don would have done everything to keep you undefeated, and then he probably would have fed you to Chavez. And while Chavez would have been favored, and Sal admittedly admitted that it would have been a mismatch, but I said I really would have liked to see it, because I'll tell you one thing: there would have been a lot of blood, and there would have been a knockout. But it probably would be a pretty good fight for however long it lasted. And I actually had the same discussion with Don himself about Sal, and he remembered Sal somewhat. He remembered the name, and he remembered meeting him one time at this golf match. And I said he wishes he had signed with you, Don. And Don, yeah, well, he should have. And I said, well, Sal regrets it.
Well, the big line with Sal all the time was, I'm going to make a comeback. Like, even when he was first diagnosed with cancer and he was battling it and he got out, he was feeling good. He said, I'm going to make a comeback. Still wanted to. No, Sal. But the whole illness was extremely hard on him and of course on the people that loved him. And, never once, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Sal for several months when he got out of the hospital when he had the brain surgery. He told me, I'm going to rehabilitation. He sounded 100%. He sounded better than he had in a long time during that conversation. Literally, he was driving or being driven, and Lisa was there. And, he said, I'm going to rehabilitation. And at that point, I said to myself, and he's telling me how great he was doing. And I'm saying to myself, going to rehabilitation after the surgery, I was thinking, he's probably, has to learn to walk and do all these things again. And then I'll call you. And I never heard from him again. I got stuff written up. I heard things that were going on. I didn't want to bother him, John, and I feel so guilty about it now. It's just, But
Well, he was cancer free, at one point. He literally texted me. I still have the text.
But he said that. But how could that?
No, he sent me the medical records. He sent me his medical records because I think he thought I didn't believe him. He sent me the medical report from Dr. Chow in Brunswick hospital there, and it said CAT scan, no signs of. It didn't say cancer, no signs of. My wife read it, the report to me, and. It said no signs of cancer or tumors or anything. Whatever it was pretty clear to me. But he felt it necessary for me to see that, and I saw it, and I said, "Wow, well, that's good." The problem is that he had brain lesions, and one of the brain lesions was big. It was in the front lobe right here. My wife is an MRI, CT, and CAT scan technician, so she knows about this stuff pretty well. But then he had the cyberknife procedure, which is a far more invasive. Now, this is what Sal said to me. He said, look, most people get no more than 3 treatments. I've gotten, I think he said, 7. And they essentially said to him, look, we either do this or you're definitely going to die of brain cancer inside of 3 months. So they laid it out for him, and he said, I'm man up, I'm going to do it. And then he had the cyber knife, and he said, that's the one that really put me down for the count, John. And he came back to some extent from it, and then he went backwards. I talked to him one day, and he was he was out of it. And then the next day, Lisa texted me and said, we're going to Emory, and that's when he went up to Emory and stayed there for about 6 months. I talked with him a couple times when he was in there. He was a little bit out of it. He actually was talking about you in one of the conversations. He was talking about that show that you guys did where you commentated on a fight from the 50s, I think it was, or something. Didn't you guys go to that hotel there and do that or something?
Yeah, it was Dax Khan is going to join us here too. What's up, Dax? Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Remembering Sal today. That gets so many views. We did a couple of fights where we broadcast them as if they were live. So we played the video of the fight and had us calling the fight. And he was he's going like this. He's going, there's a left. He lands a left. He's another left, another left, another left. He's been hit with so many lefts, he's right, And but on a sad note, I remember Alex and Dax and myself, and of course Sal. We were doing a show, and Sal didn't seem right. This was way back in the beginning. Sal didn't seem right, and he just seemed lethargic. He was having a hard time, grasping his thoughts. He got up and walking around. Yeah, he was getting up and walking around during the show, which was totally not Sal. And after the show, we were talking through Skype, and I said, Sal, you all right? And he said, oh, man. He says, I've been so tired lately. I've been lethargic. I lost 15 pounds. And I go, Sal, something's definitely wrong. Go to the doctor. Now we hadn't did a show the prior week, so it was 1 week, so 1 week he was normal. 1 week we didn't do a show. That second week comes back. I noticed this. He says, I'm going to the doctor. And that Tuesday I got the call. He says, hey, what did he say? He says, maybe I'm getting Parkinsonism, right? Remember we did the whole thing on Parkinson and Parkinsonism. And he goes, I got good news for you. And I said, what? He says, it's not Parkinson's. And I said, oh, great. He says, it's brain cancer. And I was like, oh my God, Sal, and that's the way he tried to handle it, and it was, I hated seeing him go through that, John. And I hated it because as the fighter he refused to get beat by it. And for the most part, he battled further than anyone else. Well, I should say further than most people can when you're dealing with, we're talking brain cancer. And did they ever address, because it was lung cancer and what was it, liver?
It started, the origination of the cancer was he had cancer in his
kidney, right?
In his kidney. I think it was the right-hand kidney. So, and unfortunately, he had symptoms for a year leading up to it, and he didn't address it, which he quietly told me one day. And I said, oh, man. And so they removed his kidney, and then they treated him with chemotherapy, a couple of different kinds of experimental chemotherapy. He had a patch when went to his birthday party last year. He had this patch and a pump that pumped it into him. And he was, I touched him on the shoulder and he was like, oh, and it's Sal, he's a tough guy. He doesn't do that. He was like, oh, it's so painful. I got this thing. I go, oh, sorry, Sal. We had a really nice birthday party for him at the Tree Bar up there in St. Simon's. And so they doused him with chemotherapy, and then they went at the brain with the radiation. And it was a 3-part thing. And so he literally was cancer-free, according to the medical record he showed me from his doctor. But the problem now with cancer is they have all kinds of great treatment now. The doctor said to him, well, the good news is that there's like 14 different kind of experimental cancer treatments for the kidney cancer. But we can remove the kidney and I can survive, and that's going to get rid of it altogether. The rest of the cancer that's in your body is metastasized, and so we've got to go at it with all these different ways. But we're going to throw everything at it. And they did make it up to him. They did tell him, Sal, this is what we got to do, and we got to go all out. And it's going to be your choice. With cancer like that, it was really stage 4 when it was diagnosed. He could have just packed it up and said, I'm out. I'm gonna say goodbye to my family and pack it up and leave. And he didn't. He manned up like the fighter that he was, and he took all the treatments that a human body could take, and he survived 2 years. And then his body just gave out. His brain was failing, and his organs began to shut down, and it was up and down at least for the last couple of weeks. And then it, he finally gave in. But man, the guy's a fighter. You can't. He was a fighter from when he was born, and he was a fighter when he died. I was on the phone with him, and he was in agonal breathing. He was, but I said, I love you, Sal, and he whispered something back. I think he said something like, I love you too, man, or something like that. He whispered it back. Guy was still fighting, and he died 4 or 5 hours later. You gotta love a guy like that, man.
Yeah, we used to. I mean, every time he would talk fighting, he would start getting in. And you guys, Alex and Dax, know that he would always refer to, like, remember in Rocky? It's like, Sal, would you stop? It's not a real fight. I mean, but that was the mentality. And I know it bothered him. But you guys all know Sal enough. He never really talked negatively about anyone, any fighter. I'm seeing in the chat room here, somebody reminded me that, he was the only one. I don't know about Dax or Alex, but he was the only one that I thought of on this show that was a Wilder fan. He kept saying, I don't know. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then afterwards he was like, well, maybe you're right. He doesn't really, he doesn't have much skill. I mean, you guys remember that, right?
He definitely was a Wilder fan for quite a while. I think maybe it was, I forget which fight kind of soured him on it a little, but
well,
maybe the beating he took from Tyson Fury, maybe that soured him a little.
It was definitely before that. It was before he was clearly exposed, but it was one fight where it was like, wow, yeah, he hasn't learned much.
No, well, the thing was that, he started getting sick of all the BS hype. And the first fight against Fury, it was a draw. I mean, most of us felt Fury won despite the 2 knockdowns. And I think Sal started really souring on him then. But then after the clearly loss, and then, Wilder starts blaming, the trainer, the costume, the this and that. Sal hated that.
Who didn't hate that? Was there somebody that liked that?
No.
There are still a lot of Wilder fans. I had somebody make a comment on the last show telling me that Wilder's going to knock out Fury in 5 rounds, and I don't know boxing because I don't like it. And I just it's like fingernails down a blackboard because a lot of younger fans today don't know the history. That's one thing that Sal. I appreciated dealing with Sal. He would always he always kind of went back to his era during his experience his time. But it wasn't the way a lot of young fans are today. They don't know the sport. They don't know the way it used to be. Sal was a throwback, even when it wasn't a throwback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was a throwback all the way, even with his shorts. Remember when he came in with the shorts? We were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
The shorts, the socks on those shorts.
Yeah, the shorts, the socks, and you put together a really nice tribute video, and that fight was on it, and I was watching that, and it brought back a lot of memories that night. The excitement in the crowd, and I'll be honest, I was there, I called it, I was involved with it. I don't remember seeing the joy on his face as much as I did in that video. I guess I was just wrapped up in the moment, but you could see on his face how happy he was. It was like the way he wanted to leave the sport, even though he was still talking about fighting on, but he wanted it to go that way, not the way it had 25 years earlier,
Yeah. And he had a conversation with me when he was running by his house over there on the north side of the island. And there's a pathway there's kind of a walking path for people. And he decides to go running at night. And he trips over a root or something, and he hits his shoulder. And his shoulder was already kind of bad. It wasn't good to begin with. He had problems with it when he was 19 and 20. And he goes, John, I had a little accident last night. I said, what happened? I was running, hit this root, running at night, tripped, hit the shoulder. And he goes, I think it's messed up. And he goes to one of the doctors that, regular guy there that's an orthopedic surgeon that's a customer of his. And the x-rays, and he goes, you got a torn rotator cuff. So I sat in my kitchen and I said to him, Sal, it's 25 years and at that point, 42 days before from your last fight, and you were faced with this. And what do you want to do, man? We got tickets sold and everything, but you don't want to fight. You don't want to fight. We'll pack it in and we'll go. And he goes, ain't no way I'm not making this fight, John. I don't want no one else is to know about this. We're going to do this fight. I don't care what happens. If I got to fight with one hand, I'm fighting with one hand, but I am not walking out of this the way I did 25 years ago. There's nothing that's going to stop me from doing this fight. And I said, okay, you answered my question. We'll go forward, and that's it. And we didn't tell anybody else because the commission would have stopped that fight in 1 second. Frank Gentile would have stopped it. Dr. Alan Fields is the guy that approved him for it. If he had known about it, he would have stopped that fight in 2 seconds. Wow. But you go in and watch that fight. Sal hit him he kept hitting him with so many lefts. He finally, he was right. But
I tell you what, a lot of people don't know. And I probably shouldn't even say it, but Sal's not here to get mad at me. But Sal gave his opponent money. That pissed me off. I got to be honest, John. That pissed me off. Remember, he asked him, and he was helping him out. That's the kind of guy that he was. Now, I'm not talking about money for the fight. I'm talking about after the fight. You remember that?
Yeah, and then the stuff started to go a little bad there. And I told him, I go, stop giving this guy money. Stop loaning him money. He's like, no, the guy needs help. He's got some skill. And I said, okay, but it's not, the appearance isn't that way. And, Sal, he was that guy with the wad of money that but you need money. He'd say that to me. You need money, John. You need money. I said, no, I have a full-time job, Sal. It's all right, man. He'd pull out that wad of money and say, you need a couple $100 when I go in there. I go, no, Sal, no.
Yeah,
I don't want to pay for my meal. I don't want it for free.
He was typical Italian. He did that. Yeah. If you tried to sell, he would beat up his vendors. They didn't say that. That way, how much for peppers? What are you kidding me? I'm not paying that for sauce.
The guy who pays his employees on a spiral, not a spiral notebook sideways, the one that goes on the top, the little tiny one that goes like this. He's in there doing his payroll on that. He's calculating his payroll. And
but it's deeper than that. He used to have the waitresses fill out and hand him a time card. Yeah. He would have to go and add all the hours up before he went and did it. And both John and I would always say, what are you, nuts? But you guys, Dax and Alex, you guys have been involved with him on the show, many times, and I mean, he definitely brought something to the show. I mean, first, what do you think, Dax? I mean, what are you gonna miss?
I miss everything, about him. The thing with Sal is that, I used to talk to him on the phone on a semi-regular basis. Sal would call me out of the blue. And matter of fact, when I called you right afterwards, I remember him calling me one day out of the blue, and I was surprised because it was in the middle of the day. And I know that the restaurant was open, and he broke the news to me. And at first he was really strong, and he was, telling me, and then next thing you know, he just broke down crying.
Yeah.
And he's telling me, I don't want to die. I got one more round in me. And what I try to explain to a lot of people, especially on social media, that the Billy C that you see on the show, the Alex, the me, the John, the Sal, whatever, there's an entertainment part of being on the radio and on TV. So you're not the actual same person that you are all the time. Not all the time am I sitting there ranting about, this fighter and this promoter and things. But I say something about Sal is there's very few people, and I put that on my Facebook page where, with the best compliment I can give you is, he was a true person. That's how Sal always was. There was no airs about him. I remember when I had COVID, and I knew Sal was sick, and I remember Sal calling me to ask me how I was, what he could do for me, what he needed to do for me. And I remember when we were in Vegas, me, Billy, and Alex, and that was just after gotten the news that Sal was sick. And if I'm not wrong, I think that Friday is when Sal had his kidney out. It was like on a Thursday or Friday that Sal had his kidney out, and we're in Vegas, and that was leading up to the Canelo Jacobs fight, and the media was packed. And you speak about the Deontay Wilder fight and how Sal was such a big fan. I remember when the fight happened, and Deontay used that excuse with the costume. For whatever reason, I remember thinking to myself, if Sal was only there with us, I wonder what he would say about the fight, considering I remember me and Billy walking from one side of the MGM Grand to the other, and that's like a 45-minute walk with that equipment all day. So, yeah, I can see why Deontay Wilder was tired with, the 50-pound costume on.
Well, I can speak. I know how that was.
Vegas with it,
I know how that was because I had to carry everything. Dax didn't carry one thing. The son of a bitch made me walk the whole way.
That's a lie.
I felt like Ben-Hur. Dun, dun. But I'll tell you something, and I'm glad you brought the Vegas thing up, Dax, because I don't know if it was his kidney that got removed, but he was going through something because Sal was going to come and make that trip, and his doctors had told him that they recommended he didn't. We waited till the very last second, to bring him, and he wasn't able, and that crushed him. That crushed him, Alex, that he wasn't able to be there. And, I wish. And then the goal was the next trip. He was trying to get, because then we did another one, too, the Kovalev fight. And he couldn't make that one. And that was it. He wasn't really trying to go. He wasn't able to really travel after that. But they didn't want him on a plane. That's what it was. Remember, Alex?
Right. Yeah, I think that's the thing, and yeah, John, the tribute you made for him was absolutely beautiful, and I do think that for me that was the connection. Even though we never met in person, there was this amazing connection. For me, it felt like a relative, like going to an uncle or a cousin. And I think part of it, I am Italian, half Italian. So I think that part of it was that ethnic, I have relatives like that, and that generosity he had, it even came through the screen. And that's just a beautiful thing to be like that. I really would have loved to have gone to his restaurant because, for me, that's a major part of my Italian heritage is food. And the pizza connection, I would have loved to see him there making a pizza.
Well, if you remember, you that whole show after John, and I had to admit how good the pizza was, and I was talking about pizza, Sal's Pizza, oh, it's the best, it's only to say. That's when the next day I get a knock on my door and freaking Alex sends pizza. Oh no, this pizza's the best. And he sends me the stuff from, remember the place in Connecticut that, freeze dried. They make it, you throw it in. And I had to admit on air, okay, these are my three top pizza in the world that I've ever had was this place I went to in Westchester, Sal's. And then I had to admit that Alex came through and he threw in some local soda too. Have some of this,
Yeah, the place in Connecticut is famous for its horrible driving, taxes, and pizza.
I never, but that was the whole joke of it, And Sal and I were like, "What do you mean Connecticut? We've heard New York for pizza. Some people say Chicago. And remember, we were in Chicago, John, and we're like, oh." We want Chicago pizza. So we send somebody out. I forget who went out to get it. And they bring us back pizza. And I look at it's not Chicago. Oh, you guys are from New York. I thought you wanted the New York style. We're like, what are you talking about? We wanted to try the Chicago pizza. But
the best thing about Connecticut pizza was when I was about 13 years old and Julia Roberts was actually still cute and Mystic Pizza was out in theaters. That was the
Well, Sal would, eating, I'm remembering, I could almost smell some of the food, and he would always, that spinach, remember the sauteed spinach, John? He would have, that was good. Yeah. He made his chicken marsala. I mean, anything. I never had a bad meal in that place.
The lamb chops, and then towards the end, that's what I ate every time I went in there, and I'm just thinking about it now. My mouth is watering.
I was just thinking of the pizza, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I love the marsala, and then he would always break out the cannoli, and then it was always like, oh, hey, Bill, you want a scotch? And he'd go in the back and break out the scotch because that wasn't in the front. What I was drinking was in the back. I got this for you.
And the other thing was, Billy, he would always have like one really kind of cute, hot-looking waitress there. And he was very protective.
Oh no, I used to. Oh, that one's nice. Yeah. Well,
But he was protective of his waitresses. There's one that's still there now. I think she still works there for the family because she's the one that waited on my dad on the last meal we had there. And I said, and I said, Sal, you never thought about her? He's no. But he would. Don't you remember we talked about it? Because a couple of times we went in there and he had different wait staff there. He had
all the time.
He had the manager and a couple of people that worked there, and then he'd always have a rotation of girls in there. Because Sal, he was a tough guy to work for. He was all jacked up, and people in South Georgia aren't used to that kind of energy. And he'd say to me, some of these people are so slow, and they're moving and all that stuff. And then we'd say, Sal, look at that. And then he'd say, he got angry, he didn't say leave him alone, but we could tell that. I said, Billy, I think he doesn't want us looking at his wait staff.
He used to like. I always had to sit trapped. I could never go anywhere. He didn't trust me or something. I don't know. But doing those shows there, when we had to set up outside, it was cool. But the handful of times that we did inside was always hard because the people came there and what was it, from 4 o'clock on you couldn't get a table. I remember we did I forget which event it was, and we had people drive, a whole van full of listeners drove all the way. I don't know if it was from North Carolina or something, and we just couldn't let them in. Remember, it was packed.
It only held 63 people, and I think that 63 was a lie. I don't think it could have more than when we had the Pacquiao Mayweather fight. There was at one point I counted the people because I was afraid that the fire marshal was going to come in, and there was like 68 people inside there at the peak of the fight. And it was a great atmosphere. I mean, Sal loved it. I mean, it was a really pretty cool place to watch a fight where everybody's on top of each other and we're all in it together and watching. Unfortunately, that fight didn't turn out to be very good, but the atmosphere was not to be beaten for watching a fight. It was as good as anywhere.
Well, Sal loved the lights on him. That's for sure.
He Yeah. I mean, there's not a microphone that didn't like Sal.
No, and there wasn't a microphone that he didn't like either.
No, not at all. But he performed. I mean, he could sing pretty well, and then the thing with the boxing glove, and then like if you actually watch him tossing pizzas, he knew exactly what he was doing.
Well, that was the thing. He was hands-on in that restaurant. I mean, he wasn't just a figurehead there. But I always laugh. We were talking about it earlier in the show before you guys came on, but he would play this Frank Sinatra and all this music, and it was like over and over and over, and wait staff. It just became, so you'd see people sitting, and they're listening. The wait staff, they were deaf to it. They heard it so much, and then in the background, once John put together his CD that had all of his fights on it, that was always playing in the background
for 5 years
straight.
It
was just like everything, and you guys missed it, but he used to put a boxing glove on the end of what do they call the thing that they flip the pizzas with, Alex? That long I forget what it's
the pizza spatula flipper.
Yeah, they call it something, but a stick or whatever. But anyway, he put a boxing glove on the end, on the handle. So when when the guys were taking pizzas out, he would do head movement and
he'd duck underneath it.
He'd duck underneath it, and he would ring the bell, and that was embarrassing. John, you're talking about embarrassing stuff. We walk in, he rings the bell, ding, ding, ding. It draws everybody's attention to us. We're trying to slip in there for a slice of pizza, and it's like.
And he introduces you. He introduces me like, this is my manager, and then he breaks into his Rocky Balboa thing. He goes from Balboa to Mickey, and this is my manager. I'm like,
help me, Mick. He would always
manage you for one fight, Sal. That's my career.
Yeah.
I went and got a manager's license in Florida for one fight.
We did an event. I think it was it might have been the amateur where he showed up again late. He was always late. I love Sal, but he was always late.
That was his
late. He was late to the restaurant. He was always late. I think he liked coming late. And how about when you called him on the phone? And you talk. It used to drive me insane. I'd be talking to him on the phone, and all of a sudden he started talking to me. I need $5 of that. I'm like, Sal, I'll call you back. No. I've got you right here. And it's like, Sal, I'll call you back. Call me when you're done. But he did that all the time, and he had that phone. He had that little flip phone. Carrying around with him. Sal.
I used to say to him, I said, Sal, why don't you just forget the cell phone? Why don't you just get a rotary dial and put in the
if there was still a service that would handle it, I'm sure he would have had it.
Oh, he would have that thing. You ever see like the ladies back in the 70s, like my mom would have one of those little pad you put on there so you could go like this with the phone. I told him I was going to get him a pad for his flip phone so he could go like that with it.
Sal's out there offering everybody in the world money and walks by, wants to give out $100 bills like it's candy. But you know what, Sal? Get beyond the 1999 flip phone that's over at Walmart. Invest in some modern technology here. Especially for somebody that loved to be on, talk on radio and on the microphone, but then you still got this old flip phone.
He was famous for going. He should have get one of the when he's always shaking his hands and stuff. It's like Sal. But I loved when he set up the studio. When he had the condo. This is my studio. It looks like a condo, and it's like, Did you
see it, Billy? Did you go to his house?
I did. I was there.
I mean, did you see the shit piled up on the table?
Yeah, but did you see how he had where he did the show from?
Yeah,
there was all stacked around it.
Yeah. It was stacked up on these tables.
I know. It's just like his office.
Remember that one day during the show, somebody, I think there was something in the chat. Somebody was saying something about his house, and right on the show, he made a mention of being in the back. I think Sal had left. It was like newspapers or something from a plate or something from the night before, and he blamed it on his girlfriend for not taking it into the kitchen and leaving it there.
Well, I know that he had.
But then he goes off into almost a little lifestyle of the rich and famous tangent on all the other great stuff that she put up and all the other memorabilia.
His stuff. It was always back there. But yeah.
Well, all the stuff is still at his restaurant.
There was one time, might as well, I'll say it. There was one time we were setting up for a show, and there was another female in there. It wasn't his girlfriend. So I was just like, hey, Sal. And he says, oh, just a friend, just a friend. He never, you know what? I will tell you this. Sal was very respectful of women, not only with his staff, but anybody. He wanted to keep his stuff to himself. And you got to respect somebody that does that, especially a guy that likes the limelight as much as he did. And, would have liked most people would have been a braggart when it came to that, but he was very respectful, and that's something that really showed you the kind of human being he was. Because let's face it, we can remember everything we want to, funny things, but Sal was a great human being, and that's what I think I'm going to miss the most. Not so much a friend and a guy that I loved, but he was a great human being, and really, John, I can't ever remember him. I mean, I'm trying to think, and I've never remember him really telling me that he disliked somebody. I mean, off air and stuff, he would make some comments about different things, Italian type stuff that, was between us. But the truth of the matter is he's never really talked negatively about anyone, and you got to respect that.
Look, I'll tell you, he was. My father died last year in June. And it was dead in the middle of COVID. It was the panic. Everybody couldn't do anything. So my kids were there, and my sister Ann flew down with her husband, and virtually nobody else was in the church. And I told Sal, and he said, "I'm gonna come down there. I'm gonna come down to the church." I said, "No, you don't have to." He said, "No, I'm gonna do it for you, John." And he came in with the cane, and it was shocking a little bit. He was bloated. He'd just gotten treatments and stuff. And he came in the church where his funeral is Tuesday. And he shuffled in with the cane. He was not in good shape at all. And he sat down in the back of the church. I looked around and saw him, and I just said to him, I said, Sal, thanks so much. Like, you coming to this meant more than anything. The rest of my family couldn't fly. Nobody was there. My mom was down in memory care. I had to tell my mom through the window that my dad died, but Sal showed up, and it was just our family, 4 or 5 of us. My sister came and played the cello, and the priest that my dad didn't even know, and Sal in the back. And I'll never forget that. And I thanked him. I said, I can't thank you enough for showing that kind of dedication. In the middle of this, you went out, you were in the middle of cancer treatments and stuff, and no one had shots or anything then. Yeah. And you showed up. I'll never forget that. That's one of my last memories of him doing something just, that's the kind of dude that he was that would show up in that situation for a friend.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing that to me is kind of amazing. And I was watching some of John's an LDL TV interview that you had done, and just talking about the in a way, most of his life was a blessing because of just the chance of avoiding that catastrophic plane crash. And then the other thing that I found very interesting from that interview was when he was really badly damaged from one of those early fights, the doctor who advised him that retiring at 28 might be a really advisable thing, what he had learned from Muhammad Ali's career. I was wondering if you had any more on that, John.
So it was there was a couple of things, and Billy, maybe you can jump on here and agree or disagree with my interpretation of Sal. But Sal was a little bit disgusted with how the end of his career went. He, in the one fight he was hurt, and whatever the story was there. He also got the advice to retire. But,
which, incidentally, I don't mean to interrupt you, he said was the best advice he ever got. He specifically told me that he was glad that he listened. He had a long, extended conversation with his dad over what they would do in that situation. And that's one of the reasons he turned his back. But he, you know as well as anyone, he regretted it.
Exactly. Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, he took the advice from the doctor and his father, but he regretted it for 25 years. And Sal would always say, 25 years, such days, so many hours, you know, when he made the comeback, you know.
Yeah, and he said when I met him, he was an usher at St. William's Church, and he met my dad, my mom and dad at coffee afterwards, and he's in the coffee, you know, the donuts and coffee after church, you know, the typical Catholic church thing. And he's in the back. He's standing up there. My dad says, "This crazy guy is out there throwing punches and stuff. He was a boxer." And then my dad says, "I made the mistake of telling him my son works for Don King," and that was it. And then the first time I see him, I meet him. He stops what he's doing in the restaurant. The restaurant is full, and he gets me outside. And he's got that smock on, you know, and his pizza all over and everything. And he starts throwing punches, and I look and I go. And he's throwing them, and he's throwing them close to me. You know, he's going like this, and I'm standing there next to that, you know, that fancy restaurant across the way there.
Yeah, the one that no one ever went.
No one ever goes in. Yeah. So he does this now. It goes on like 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row. Every time I go in there, and I was up there pretty regularly, he's doing this thing. We got to do something. So I started thinking about it, and that's when I got, you know, when I did that fight in Atlanta with Adrian Patrick, I said, "Hey man, what about promoting a fight?" And he goes, "Tell me the situation." And I go, tells him the whole thing. He goes, "Well, I'm in on that, man." He goes, "We'll do a fight in St. Simon's, all this stuff." And then the whole thing went on with the boxing commission. They didn't approve him. It was just like the Rocky movie. It was almost the same thing. He's in front of the commission. They say, "No, you can't fight." He's pissed. He drives home back to St. Simon's. He goes, he was a little pissed at Adrian Patrick because Adrian was a lawyer and didn't know the law, that after 50, you have to have had 10 fights in the previous 10 years and all that. So it
was a funky rule.
Yeah, well, I got on the phone and I made a couple calls, and then I called Alan Fields, the doctor, and I knew him well because Alan was at all of our fights, and he was a DKT friend and stuff. I said, "Hey, man, can you get him improved?" He goes, "Yeah, well, what's the deal?" And I go, "He's in great shape, Doc. He's fine." He goes, "Yeah, but I'm going to have to put him through a bunch of tests." So I tell Sal everything, and a week later, Sal spends like $10,000 because it's not covered by insurance because he's going and getting all these tests. He gets an MRI, he gets a stress test, he gets all this stuff. And Fields calls me back. He goes, "Yeah, he's fine, John. He's in good shape, man. He's got a good, you know, he's telling me all his vitals." And I go, "Okay." And that was it. And I called Sal back. I said, "We're in business, brother." And then I said to myself, 6 or 8 months later, what did I get myself into when I was at that fight and the ring wouldn't stick together on the bottom? These two girlies I hired.
Oh, I know.
I was like, oh my God. I said, "I'm never promoting a fight again. This is the worst thing." I'm looking at the ring and I go, "I'm afraid this ring is going to collapse." I'm just like, "Sal, can you knock up? Can you do something? Get this thing over with."
Well,
it happened.
That fight, you know, and credit to Sal. I mean, he got in shape for that fight. There's no question. He lost like what, 40 pounds?
Yeah, he was 190.
You know, and he wanted to. He wasn't going to fight at lightweight, but he would have if he could have.
Yeah.
But, he ended up fighting that fight at 160, right?
Yeah, he weighed 150 something.
Yeah. But I forgot that's where I met you, was the Atlanta that Adrian. That's a whole nother story.
He's out of the business now.
I know he's become a political figure now. But in any event, that fight in Florida, right over the border. That was that whole night.
Beach.
Yep, Fernandina Beach.
I found a gym. The city of Fernandina Beach rented it for $250 for one night.
What, that venue?
Yes.
Yeah.
$250 for the night, plus we had to pay for, I don't know, somebody to be there, security.
Well, Jeff Gibson, right?
Yep. Yeah, Jeff.
He was the promoter of record.
Yeah, he didn't have to do anything. He just showed up with his hot chicks and the bikinis.
When I was watching the video, I went, and somebody was watching with me, I went, "Oh, that's right, those two ring card girls." And I was like, "Oh, that's right, that's Jeff." You know, and it all because it just slipped my mind. You know, he showed up with them, and he played the part of of basically doing nothing but let me use my my license to do this.
Yeah, and we caught Mark Lichtenfeld. So Lichtenfeld, well, thank God I had Eric Botcher there to do all the matchmaking, because he pulled on Wednesday. We didn't even have a fight card, and Botcher pulled it together.
It actually was an entertaining card from start to finish.
Yeah, it was okay. And but when I was finished, I said, I'm never promoting a fight again by myself. Never. No one could pay me enough to go do that stuff and deal with the stress that was going on there with that. But in the end, all that mattered was Sal got his record, and he was forever. He felt like he was forever in debt to me and you and everybody else that put that fight on, because he told me that, right up to the end. He goes, "You made my dream come true," and that he said that, and it was great. It was, that's what our friendship was based on, was that whole fight, and everything that led up to it, and the record and all that stuff. And then, he'll be my friend forever, man. He was a great guy.
The beachfront open workout that we broadcast.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, the King and Prince, right? Yeah. We got out in front. He's by the beach.
I love
broadcast it.
No, I know. It was great. I mean, all this stuff, but all those events at Sal's, I think I know the fight was great, and we had a lot of stuff that we traveled and did all of us together, but the events at Sal's place, I'll never forget, because of the conditions there and because of Sal's stubbornness. Like, we begged him. How many times did we beg him? Sal, you got to we'll do an event here. We'll pack the place. You can actually, because everybody, we can say it now, Sal paid for closed circuit, right? I mean, just to have an event there, the food bill alone, because he wouldn't let anybody pay. I mean, like, it was all out of his pocket, and he refused to ruffle his customers. The customer, they come in on such and such. I gotta, we'll start doing this, and you were like, yeah, but I need to set up. I need to do this. We need to take that back table, and he's going, that back table, 3 hours, I could get 6 different people in and out of there. No, you can't have that back table. You got to do it outside.
Yeah, we went up to stream a Christy Martin fight, and he went up with me to do the commentary. And when we were driving up, somehow we got on looking at his reviews, right? He's got like 600 reviews on there. And I said, I want to look at the bad reviews. And so one of the reviews says, and it's the day of the Pacquiao Mayweather fight is the day that the guy writes the review. Came to Sal's, everybody told me it was great, and the damn place was shut down because he had a fight going on. And Sal saw that. He saw the comment, and it just solidified everything in his head. Just one customer got pissed off because we were having the fight that night, and it was sold out. No one else could buy a ticket to get in, and I could see him just shaking his head and thinking about it, and it never, never left his mind that he might have disappointed one customer out of the
the van full that drove from the Carolinas that couldn't get in. He was crushed over it. He came out. And we were so. You
let them sit outside or something.
They sat outside, but they ended up leaving because you had them so scared that the closed circuit police were going to come in.
Yeah.
And we had to board up the windows or put stuff over the windows. And but I tell you, after all the events that we did there, the guy across like you mentioned, that other restaurant across the way there. I mean,
and Sal got so you're saying about people he didn't like. He hated that guy. So
he never said anything bad about him.
No, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. He said. So I'm half Irish. I'm half Lithuanian, half Irish. And I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and I had my whole Irish family from Utica. And I told you when we were down there, I said, my grandfather used to use this. I think it's a slur, but
I never heard that. When you said that, I never heard it.
Walio.
Yeah, no,
that's what he said. My grandfather said that. Sal knew what it meant, but Sal was the same. Like my grandfather would say, "Yeah, them Walios," and you just throw the word. Like those guys, those Archie Bunker guys, just threw this stuff out there with they didn't even care. So one day, Sal's saying that, and Sal never cursed ever. I could never even get him to drop an F-bomb or an S-bomb or anything. But the guy over there, Delaney, was an Irish guy, and he'd say that freaking Mick over there with that crappy restaurant, ba 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 ba. And I said, "Wow, I didn't realize it was a rival." He goes, "Doesn't even have anybody coming in there, and he's worried about who I got coming in mine." And so one time we did one of the events, and I took I bring that U-Haul trailer. And there's no spots there, so I found the last spot in the back there, and I literally picked up the trailer and put it in there. And Sal came in, he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, Delaney came over and yelled at Sal. I think he went down into Sal's warehouse in the middle of the fight or something and yelled at Sal. Sal was down there doing something in his junk pile. And Delaney yelled at him. He came back up, and I go, "All right, Sal, don't worry. I'll move it." So I picked it up, and I moved it down next to Sal's little Alfa Romeo down in the bottom there. And at that point, I realized there was a real rivalry going on between those two guys, restaurateurs. And that was one of the few times.
He wasn't crazy about the 5 and 10 or that woman there that sold the clothes.
Because he caught her one Sunday. Before Sal opened on Sundays, she came out, took all of her stuff for Rex, and put them in where Sal's tables are, moved his tables and put all of her stuff there. And he shows up for the first day he's going to open on Sunday, and she's got all her stuff there. Oh, he was pissed. I don't know what he said to her, but I don't think it was too pleasant. And she never did it again.
You mentioned the parking. I remember for events, I'd get there so early just to get a parking spot.
No parking.
It was crazy. And it was a 2-lane. You guys never went, but it was a 2-lane road, and St. Simon's is very well-to-do tourist place, so it's kind of hard to maneuver in and out. And the park, when Sal's business did so well, I mean, it was always packed to put there. And I just cherished the parking spot. Once I got there, I didn't want to leave that car, no matter what. It was like getting that spot in the city, can't go. I got my parking spot,
The only time to ever go in that restaurant, for some reason, there was a dark spot, and it was Saturday afternoon between 2 and 3:30. You could walk in, and there was hardly anybody or very few people sitting in there eating or anything. And that when I went to my parents' house, I would go there. I'd run there with my dad. We'd go at 2:30 or 2 o'clock, and nobody was there. And then at one point, Sal got that big TV and decided he was going to turn it into like a college game day or something. And goodbye to the 2 o'clock lull. There was 50 million Georgia fans in there eating and drinking pizza, and that was over. You couldn't go there again in the football season.
I went in one day, and he had to, they were watching the Bulldogs, and I'm an Alabama fan.
Not a place
I tell you the truth. Because I spent so much time there. I like the Bulldogs. I mean, not when they're playing my guys, but I like them. I was a Forst fan. And that was the Fromm era when he was the quarterback.
Sal got and one time we got that big TV because I had to come in and bring that projection thing, and it was you saw me. You know how long it took me to set up for that show? That took me as long as it took to set up for a boxing show with 3 commentators and 4 cameras.
I know.
It took me all day to set it up. So I said, Sal, why don't you just get a big TV in there? So I talked him into buying this TV. It's like a 75-inch TV.
He used it and returned it, didn't he? Wasn't he
got it in there, and the people, customers came in and go, Sal, what are you turning this into a sports bar or something? This sucks.
That's what he wanted.
And he took it. Well, it turns out that he owned that building downtown, and I never even knew. I didn't realize it. He owned this building. He bought it when he first got there. It was a very famous building. It used to be the Bijou Theater in downtown Brunswick. It was owned by Paramount Pictures back in the 1920s. It was a hot spot. And he bought the building, never did anything with it, but it's right there in the strip of downtown. And we could have opened that thing as a sports bar.
Yeah, but the other thing is we could have did all of those events from there. And it had the apartment upstairs, remember? You know, and it was like all of that stuff, you know, but that's, you know, that's the eccentric part of Sal Senecola.
Yeah.
There were certain things like, you know, you can't say anything. You can't tell him he had a cute waitress because he was about, you know, he didn't want to use that building. He'd pay for it and everything. There was a flood because of the roof leaked, but he didn't want to fix the roof, you know, and all of those things. And as ironic as it turned out, that was where they filmed that movie.
Yeah, Live by Night. So that's the building in the movie where they threw the guy off the roof. That's Sal's building.
Right, and they gave him a part.
Yeah, they gave him the 1 second part where he gets blasted in the face, which it took me on my editor. I had to slow it down so much to get the frame shot. I said, Sal, you literally got one frame. You know, it's 30 frames per second. You got one frame of Ben Affleck blasting you in the face with his.
He was so happy about that too. I remember when he got that part and he called me and how happy he was it was going to be working with Ben Affleck. And from the way he presented it, I thought Sal was like the co-star.
Well, you know what happened was Ben Affleck.
He had to get the card. He had to get the SAG card for that, right?
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. So they came and they rented a whole city block, but Sal's building is still pretty authentic in its facade. So when they came to rent it, Sal said, I want to talk with Ben Affleck. So, you know, he went to Ben Affleck's house up in where is it? Savannah. And he hung out with Ben Affleck and, you know, got the whole thing going. And then I think he sort of talked him into having that little part, and he gave him that little part in the movie. But that's where Sal was like, I'm going to be an actor, and he got himself a manager, and he took acting lessons, and then he was in a couple of plays up there in St. Simon's, and then he got his Screen Actors Guild card. He sent me a picture of it somewhere. He texted it to me.
And he had an agent. He had an agent that made him go down and do readings. Down, he was traveling, and
yes,
you know, all this.
The guy that wrote the article. So y'all read the. Google Sal Senecola. There's an article by this guy that is a radio DJ there in in Brunswick, and he wrote this story about Sal. And Sal, I think it was it was some movie, and Sal dubbed over his audio, and the guy had to correct the audio and do all this stuff. And you know, Sal loved that stuff. Just talking about doing that acting, that was just a step under boxing for him.
I know it was. He was quite the guy. Alex, does your person that's in the screen there want to have any comments? Oh, I guess I insulted him. He just left. I'm getting people in the chat room. John Signorella said, "Hey, beautiful cat, Alex." You know, it's like get the this is about Sal, it's about Alex's cat. You know,
man.
But
you jumped up on there. You see me? I'm going Pietro.
Yeah, I tell you, the other things too with Sal is the events we did in other sports bars. Carl King was with us several times, and that was always interesting to get those two together, John.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat room, Billy. I just missed your last thing that you said, and I had the sound up, so I couldn't hear it.
No, I was saying about Carl King when we did with Carl. When Carl and Sal were together, it was like,
oh yeah, man, those are two guys. The stories between those two guys. If you ever get the chance to hang out with Carl, wow, does that guy have a lot of stuff in his head?
You know, I almost called him yesterday, but I didn't want to do it because Alabama opened up a can of whoop ass on his.
yeah, and his guys there, yeah.
You know, but I was even actually a little nervous. I'm sitting there watching the game, and I'm like, oh man, it's like a whole new roster for Alabama, you know, and it's like, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter who they are. They're all just, you know, romping. And Miami's got a good team. You know,
yeah, those days are gone for Miami, though. Those days of getting every single great player south of Orlando are long gone. No more monopoly.
Well, they had all those sanctions against them that were lifted, so it should be good coming up. But Sal's going to be missed 100%. It just, you know, John, like we talked via email. It sucks out of all the people, and don't get me wrong, I don't think anyone should have to suffer with death at all, let alone an illness like that. But out of all the people and how helpful he was, with others, and the type of human being he was. It's so sad that he had to go through what he went through. And I never met a guy that was so optimistic and tried to stay positive. Even like Dax, you were right. I mean, he definitely had his moments with me several times where he was very upset physically and emotionally, was nervous about the outcome, but turned the page and looked at it as a fight. And and looked at I'm knocked down, but I get up. Good champions get up, and for the most part, I mean, it was like he was giving me blow by blow of his battle with cancer, and I inevitably, not to sound pessimistic, but inevitably, I think cancer is kind of undefeated in the long run right now. People beat it for a little while, but out of all the people, it pains me to know that Sal had to go through what he did, and the extent of damage that his body underwent for that battle was extremely sad.
It's really, you're right. I've known a lot of people who've had that same thing, and a friend of mine's mother had a similar situation where she started to get better and she was doing well. I remember how well Sal was doing for a while, and they told her that she was in remission, and for about 6 months she was going around visiting her grandkids. She was coming up here to New York, and then one day she wasn't feeling well. She was feeling tired. She went to the doctor. He sent her for blood work, and the cancer returned, and unfortunately the second time around was actually worse than the first time around. But the thing I'll miss about Sal the most, I'll just leave it at this, is that, like I say, the way you talk on the radio and things we say, we criticize fighters, we talk about the fights, we criticize the promoters, and that's all part of the show. And the thing that was special about Sal is I've always had a lot of people say, because everybody loved his personality, and I've had so many people ask me, is Sal really like that? And so, Sal is really like that in real life. And, just the times that we talked on the phone, and the thing that with Sal is that he really loved life. And there's not a lot of people who love life, because Sal did a little bit of everything. He was a fighter. He loved the acting. The time that we used to spend talking, because I have a friend of mine that owns a building where the movie The Fugitive Kind was shot, which takes place down south, but it was actually shot up by Highland, New York. And Sal would like to listen to the stories. And, he was like, he owned a pizza place. He would set the world record. And what a lot of people, what I loved the story was some kids from my son's school, when they first found out about him being on the show and, us doing the show, and they were asking me, they had Googled Sal and they found out about him being on the 1980 Olympic team. And I remember that one time I asked him, I said, would you talk about it on the show? And I asked him, and he said yes, and he discussed it briefly, and then we spoke about it later on. And I remember him telling me that story again, and just, how him and Bobby Ches were injured, which is why they didn't go over to Poland, and him telling me that feeling that he got when he turned on the TV and he seen that the whole rest of the team died, and how he felt ever since that. He really appreciated life so much more, because he felt like he was given a second chance, and he was going to use every minute of that, and he wasn't going to waste any of that, because it's not often that anybody ever has a second chance at anything. And, he was a young guy then, and Sal really did live his life to the fullest, and he enjoyed everything. And he called me a couple months ago. He told me he was very disappointed. He said he was doing okay. And this was, I think, back around June. But then he's telling me he had to sell the restaurant, and the tone of his voice was very sad when he said it. I could tell he was disappointed. He had to move back up. He just goes, Dax, it was just too much for me. And he goes, but I am up in Jersey. I said, Sal, how about if things go well over the summer, as long as things get back under control with COVID and that, and once the kids get back into school, I says, I'll come down and I'll see you. And he was happy about that. And I said, so we'll just play it from there and we'll see what happens. And I hadn't talked to him for a while, but it's always one of the things where it's like, you're going to regret, maybe I wish I would have went and seen him a little bit sooner. I wish, would have put that little bit of time aside. But he was a great guy, and he was definitely somebody that, as Bill knows, John knows, Alex knows, to be around him, whether it was a day, a week, whichever, your life was definitely better for it.
I will say this. A lot of people don't realize Sal was successful in many, many things, not just the restaurant and boxing, but he was a hairstylist. He was an investor, like worked for not. It wasn't an investor. What did he do? He helped with people with investments, right, John?
Yeah. He was a financial planner, and then he was an insurance agent. His the hair salon that he owned was called the Uppercut.
Yeah, no, I remember. But that's the kind of guy he was. He set his mind out to do something, and he did well with it. You know, a couple of things I wanted to mention real quick. You know, I regret, and we all have regrets of, you know, not getting a chance to when we lose people, not getting a chance to say goodbye or whatever. But I am thankful that in my particular case, and I have to admit it was on purpose. My memories of Sal are all obviously good ones, and I'm talking about the physical part. I never, you know, I've seen some photos and video, and I talked to him while he was ill and battling from a hospital bed. He was, you know, he wanted to do a show one day from the hospital. As a matter of fact, he did a couple from the hospital bed, and sounded terrible when you have the camera on him. But my memories, the image, if I close my eyes and think of Sal, will be the Sal that was prior to cancer. And I'm thankful for that. One thing I want to bring up is we did this event at the hotel, that ones you were talking about, John, about we were calling these fights, and you know, fights that we had aired like they were live. And Bobby Ches got up to talk, and Dax, you brought up the situation here with Bobby Ches and Sal not being on that plane, which they were both very close because of that. But Sal gets up and Bobby Ches, you know, Sal asked him to get up and say some stuff, so he's sitting there. Now here we are, and John knows the area. We're in St. Simons, Georgia, a Bible Belt area, okay? People are very religious. And Bobby Ches gets up and says, well, I'm an atheist, right? And Sal, the look on Sal's face, and I look over at Sal, and I'm like, and we're like, what are you doing? You know, like, what did you just say? You know, do you realize where you are? You know, and he says, yeah, you know, I'm an atheist. You know, I don't know if it was, you know, for any, but something definitely was there to prevent me from getting on that plane. You know, and he says, and you know, it was my father. My father didn't believe in anything. He starts saying that his father didn't let him go. Like he got, you know, and Sal tries to cover it up a little bit. He's going, well, my shoulder, you know, I wasn't able to go because of my shoulder, you know. And I just, you know, we talked about that afterwards, and because Bobby was having a little too many that day. And he was, Sal says to me, I couldn't believe it. You know, he says, but I gotta give, and this is like what John, you said. He goes, I gotta give everyone credit. No one said anything about it. I said, yeah. What were they all thinking, you know? And meanwhile, we got Ray Mercer there, who's an adventure in itself. I love Ray. And Marlon Starling, who was, you know, a class act always, but it was a fun time, and I'll never forget the look on Sal's face when Bobby said that at the podium. I'm an atheist, you know, and here we are in the Bible Belt, but you had to be there. But it was actually probably on our. It's probably part of that show, but anyway.
I can't help laughing because as soon as you said the Bible Belt, I was expecting you to say that Bobby went up there and started off with a bunch of curse words and that, but the fact that I'm an atheist.
Well, we tried to convince Bobby many, many times because he's had life-saving experiences where, you know, there's no explanation. I mean, the one where he was in the burning car on the Jersey Turnpike, and he miraculously lives with minor burns and stuff. I mean, there were several times where he could, you know, kind of contributed to you know, a religious, you know, help, and he just refuses. You know, he's like that character who, you know, no matter what, you know, show me, I don't believe you. You know.
Yeah. Ches texted me that I texted him that when Sal passed, he wrote me back. I haven't talked with him in a long time, but when Sal was coming back, I didn't really know Ches. I mean, he fought for Don King Productions when he fought Holyfield, that fight before Tyson. So I'd met him. I saw him at a couple fights. I hung out. We had a local fight there, and Ches was a great color commentator. I was a big fan of his. But he calls up. I said, Sal, we're going to do some announcements, and he goes, find Bobby Ches and tell him. So I look up. Somehow I find Ches's phone number, and he and he hasn't talked with Sal in a bunch of years. And Ches calls me back. He goes, John, it's Bobby Ches. And I said, hey man, thanks. I go, Sal's coming back to fight. He goes, Sal Senecola? And I go, yeah. I go, hang on, let me put him on the phone. And he gets on the phone with Sal, and he goes, Sal goes, hello? And I go, Sal, I got Bobby Ches on. Ches goes, Sal, what the hell are you doing? What's the matter with you? That's his first statement he makes to him in like 15 years they hadn't talked. And then they stopped, and everybody laughed, and they started talking. And Ches says, you were always crazy, Sal. You're out of your mind. What's the matter with you? You going to get hurt? What's the matter with you? On and on. It was great. It was a funny conversation, though, just the way he said. I thought he'd say, "Oh yeah, Sal, I love you, man." No.
Let's speak for Sal here right now. I've been getting a lot of emails, texts, and phone calls actually from many different people about the state of boxing, and you know I've been kind of staying away because I've personally have been turned off by a lot of the stuff that's been going on with the sport, you know, YouTubers fighting TikTokers and, you know, Mayweather fighting a YouTuber and all these things. But Augie from Riverhead, it says to me, he left me a voicemail the other day. He says, I got to know, you know, I mean, what do you think about the state? So if Sal were here right now, I would like to, you know, get your guys' thoughts on how Sal would look at what's happened with the sport. I mean, Jake Paul does outrageous pay-per-view numbers. And incidentally, I saw a video clip where they should have ruled it a knockdown. The ropes clearly left them standing. And first I'll start off with you, Alex. I mean, what do you think Sal would have said if I asked him the same question, what he thought of the state of boxing today with the types of fighters and, you know, these introduction to YouTubers, TikTokers, Evander Holyfield stepping in for Oscar De La Hoya to fight on September 11th. I mean, what do you think Sal would have said?
Well, I think that, you know, I think he would agree with some of the sentiments you've already expressed, that, you know, this is a sport. Boxing is not a part-time thing. So I think that the thing with all these YouTubers, it is a little disappointing, especially if you're a lifelong boxing fan, to see people become so successful when there's other fighters who are, you know, people no one knows that work so much harder. However, at the same time, I think to some degree, boxing is such that it has room for both. And I think that's the thing that I think we've all expressed about Sal was a live and let live guy. He was a positive guy. So I think the idea that other people are having success, he wouldn't try to take that away. But I do think that, you know, I'm not sure he'd be too interested in it. You know, kind of like, like I know you're not too interested in it, Billy, and I agree. But I don't think he'd feel the need to, take shots at it. It's not his thing. And I think the thing that is interesting about boxing today is despite all these things that happen and lots of cancellations and postponements, boxing keeps going along. We've had some really good fights this year. And we have some great matchups coming up. I'm really looking forward to Joshua Usyk at the end of this month. So, and I think that's the thing about it is that's what a guy like Sal, who came up in the age of, the 80s, which I didn't realize it back then, but looking back now, wow, yeah, there was boxing was bigger and the talent pool seemed deeper. So I think in that sense, yeah, there'd be a nostalgia that he'd have for those kind of heydays. But I think he'd also recognize that that we are seeing some good fights still happening.
Well, I know this. Consider this. Sal Senecola, his style, okay, was that of Vinny Pazienza, as a matter of fact. Those kinds of guys, that came at you and gave it your all. Jake LaMotta. I mean, that style. Yeah, Arturo Gatti. That's Sal Senecola. And Sal, I know many conversations on and off the air. That's the way he thought of the way boxing was. And you're right. And I say this to people all the time. If you asked me in 1985 if I was witnessing the last great era of boxing, I would have laughed at you, because I wouldn't have thought that I was witnessing the last great era of boxing, because I didn't think it was a great era. I was thinking the years before that, in the Ali times, in the 70s and late 60s, I thought it was a better era. But as we know now, it was. And I think that Sal, whether he never said it on air, but trust me, we had many, many hours worth of conversations. He hated the fact that the fighters ducked and ran. The one thing, and again, he never really said it on air, and anybody that's ever listened to the show knows how I feel about Floyd Mayweather. It's not Floyd. It wasn't knocking his ability. But I always thought that we never saw the best Floyd because of his style, his running, and Sal hated that too. And, yes, we know today that, being like that style fighter has long-term effects, repercussions, so on and so forth. But still, the sport, the excitement level, Alex, you mentioned some good fights coming up. Yeah, but, like AJ and Usyk, it was a fight I wanted to talk about. Does Usyk have a chance? Does he have the power to hurt AJ? I'm curious to know what Sal would have thought about that fight, Dax. I mean, do you think that he would have looked at it from a boxer versus boxer a view, or would he have looked at Usyk as being the boxer, the Michael Spinks against Larry Holmes style fight? I mean, because I kind of see a lot of similarities with this matchup that I saw when Spinks fought Larry Holmes. And I think that Usyk could actually beat AJ should he employ a fight plan similar to what he did of Michael Spinks. What's your thoughts?
I think, well, again, once I found out that Sal had passed, Sal had this on-running joke every time we talked that whenever it would come back from some sort of commercial break, you'd have us on a split screen, and you'd always catch me and Sal, like either one of us were drinking coffee or Sal sitting there with his face doing this. And so I can actually see Sal with that little face of his, like with that frown line sitting there deep and thing, like Jake Paul, he'd be like, he might. And then he would somehow find a way to refer him to somebody that he knew at some point in time in his life. And then he'd tell you, well, all I can say is that he better stay away from Canelo and stop making him mad, because that's going to be something that he's not going to be too happy about. And then when it comes to the AJ and Usyk, I can see him going right to Wilder. Well, if you would have asked me this before the Andy Ruiz Jr. fight, I'd say that Usyk has no chance, but I thought that Deontay Wilder, don't tell anybody, but, I thought he was going to knock Tyson Fury out, and then I was Sal, but you've said that a million times on the show. Yeah, I know, but that was just for the show. But I really mean it this time.
Hey, John, I think Sal would have said something like, well, in Rocky III, right? He would have come up with some kind of analogy based on, and I always used to say, Sal, it wasn't a real fight, man. It was a movie, stop referring to it, It used to drive me crazy. But the reason, when you look at it, was the whole Rocky thought, not the fight, not the movie or anything like that, but the type of character Rocky was. That's what Sal related to. And that's what he, really, whether he said it publicly or not, that's what he missed from the sport. You know, that fun, that drive to work out and get to the point where you're prepared for a fight. You know, I look at some of these fighters. The Charlo brothers never did anything for me. I think they're overrated. You know, and I wish Sal was here to talk about that. But what do you think, John? Always, you think he would have been? What would he have said about that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. One thing, and we actually had this discussion over the last year, talking to him on the phone. He certainly isn't going to disparage any professional fighter who comes back and fights. I talked with him about Mike Tyson after that fight, and he certainly isn't going to be one to disparage any professional fighter who comes back and fights for whatever reason. But he definitely was not on air, was thought all of this YouTube fighting and stuff was a joke. As I think everybody that here, you guys are real boxing experts. I was in the business, but not as much an expert as you guys. But it does make me just clench my teeth and like there's no way that I could plunk down $70 to watch Mayweather fight a YouTube guy. It just couldn't happen. And in the old days, even in a bad pay-per-view, I would plunk the money down to see two guys fighting for a real belt and all that stuff. And Sal definitely agreed with me on that. I said, I can't bring myself to buy one of these. I bought the Mike Tyson fight. It was staged and whatever, and Roy Jones ran for half hours, as anybody would still run from Mike Tyson.
How about that commercial? Have you seen the new Mike's Hard Lemonade commercial?
No.
There's a commercial with Tyson, right? And then there's one Hard Mike's Lemonade left. And
yeah, I have seen that.
The guy walks up, oh, there's only one left. And the girl's like, it's Mike's. He's like, well, Mike. Yeah, it's Mike's. And he's like, I don't care. And he grabs it, and Mike Tyson comes out. You touching my?
Yeah, I did see it.
He puts it down and runs. He said, I was just gonna say, there's more in the fridge. He goes, man, that guy's fast. As he's running down the neighborhood, But
Sal, I don't think Sal would come on the show here, and I don't think he ever did. And really. He was hard pressed to disparage somebody, almost no matter what, and he did have that sort of respect for the boxing business. That these guys that are in the fight business, as I do, I never stepped in the ring and got punched in the face, and so anybody that steps in the ring and is willing to get punched in the face for, I paid guys at Don King Productions $250 and withheld $100 in money for their hotel room. I mean, I got respect for guys like that are willing for $150 to step in the ring and get the crap kicked out of them. I will forever be respectful of those guys, but I've lost a lot of faith with the YouTube guys, and I know that Sal lost some faith in it too, because we did have specific discussions in the last year about these YouTube guys and about Mayweather fighting these ridiculous fights and getting his fan base to pay $70 to watch this stuff. That just doesn't leave a good taste in your mouth. And Sal was not all about that. Sal was the blood and guts dude who didn't care. Go back and watch that Choo Choo Dixon fight. Step up, step forward, and take. He had cuts all over his face, and the retina was detached, and he just didn't even care. Just stepped in there and got bloody and did what he had to do to win. And that's how the guy's life was, man. His whole life was like that, right to the end.
He was negative. He did turn sour on Wilder. He was a big Wilder fan for a while, but he did turn sour on him when Wilder just seemingly has lost his mind. But there was one time where he did come on the air and he was negative, and it took him a while to get over it, but it was over Canelo. I don't know if you guys remember, but he was anti-Canelo over the whole Triple G thing. When Triple G, and he just the style that Sal fought. He couldn't understand what the issue was with Canelo. But then Canelo kind of righted the ship by coming back and having those big signature wins against guys that were bigger and all that stuff. But he was sour on Canelo for a bit. He was.
As I said, like John said, he was never disparaging. That's why I said, if you asked him about it, Sal would just always try and go about it in a diplomatic way because as being an ex-fighter and that, you don't want to bash any fighter and, you always want to have respect for the fighter. But now that since John brought up the Roy Jones Mike Tyson, Bill, let me ask you a question. How would Sal would have answered that if, we went on the show and you said, Sal, what do you think of Roy's comments at the end of that fight where he said everything that Mike touched him with still hurt? Roy is actually younger than Mike, and Mike smokes $40,000 worth of marijuana a month. How do you think they would have done in their primes? How would Sal have answered that question?
First of all, Sal loved both of those fighters. There's no question about it. But I did speak to Sal after that fight, and he was shocked. I mean, even though we all knew it was an exhibition by definition, I think everybody that watched that fight and then had to sit through the fact that it was ruled a draw, that did bother Sal. That bothered Sal. He's like, "Oh, Tyson was killing him with those body shots," and it was hard to hear them come up and say it was a draw. And they actually had some decent refs. I mean, judges in that fight. Was Vinny? Who was one of the judges?
Christy Martin won.
Well, she was one. There was another fighter that was one. Was it Vinny Pazienza?
Yeah, it was. I think it was Pazienza. Let me look it up.
And then there was a real judge, but they all.
Yeah, and they knew beforehand. Pretty much everybody knew that's what the outcome was supposed to be because it was.
Yeah.
It was an exhibition, and it was just more or less to create
Chad
interest.
Dawson was the other one.
It was at the right time, right after the pandemic, so gave fans something to watch. But for Sal, somebody like Sal and John, you work with Don King, and considering Sal's era and how talented the '80s were, we're not going to say it's the last great era because there's great fighters now. The '90s was a great era,
but they don't fight against each other today.
I'm talking about the '90s, but anyway. In Sal's point in time, where it was, if you weren't fan friendly, you weren't getting on TV, and your career wasn't advancing. Back in the '80s, remember that's when we had the Tuesday night fights and stuff like that, and that's Sal was that type of fighter that you would want to see. And you talk about all these great fights that would happen.
Fought his first fight on ESPN. How many guys make their debut on ESPN in prime time?
Well, the thing is that. Fighters today compare the promoters, right? So the promoters have divided themselves. PBC is notorious for only having their own fighters fight each other, and so on and so forth. Bob Arum is no different. But back in the day, nobody hated each other more than Don King and Bob Arum. But John, as well as anyone else, when there was a fight to be made, the hatred was put aside because these guys could all make some big bucks.
Look at
those Fab Four. Those guys were making $5 to $10 million per fight back in the '80s. Because of the draw and how many people wanted to see those fights.
Look at Don and Arum brawled in the press. I literally, I can picture this one phone call where he calls up Bob. Dude, you think those guys were blood brothers? Hey, Bob, what's going on, man? Yeah, Don. I listened to him on speakerphone. There is zero animosity, and they weren't even working on a big fight. I can't remember what it was. This is like maybe 2008, 9. I don't even remember. It was, those guys were like all about business, and the whole rivalry thing. It just made it. It was just show. When it came down to business, those guys got it done, man.
Got it done.
They got it done.
Yep. And they don't seem to be doing that today, though, John.
No.
That's the one big difference. They the success of Dana White and the UFC is partly to blame because they're all trying to have like a league of their own.
They're trying to be Dana White. They're trying to be Dana White. And you know what? You can say what you want about DK, but the guy dominated the business, but he made the fights when he needed to make the fights. I watched him, when they negotiated with Oscar De La Hoya for Trinidad, both those guys had everything to lose. It did, just over 1 million buys. But Don said, I'm getting this thing done. I don't care how it happens. I'm making it happen. And that might have been the last time there was a really true two undefeated welterweights fighting for a real championship in a real fight. And it took enormous powers to do that stuff. And there's not a guy now, any of these DAZN and all these other factions out there that want to step up and do that. You're right. They all think they're going to be Dana White and have a $4 billion business if they can do it. And they can't. You can't own it.
Carl King and I were having a couple of drinks, and we were talking about, along the lines of what we're saying now, and the knock on Don King is, you talk to anybody that doesn't know the man, and he screwed fighters, he did this, he did that, and Carl put it in perspective one day when we were sitting and chatting about it. He says, he goes, you take a fighter, and they're negotiating with Don. And Don knew the power of money, still does. And he would take and he always had the cash, John, and a suitcase full of cash. And he offers him, I'll give you this much for the fight. I'll give you this and then opens up a briefcase filled with cash, and the fighter accepts it. Let's say it's $500,000. I'll give you $500,000 now. I'll give you another $500,000 after the fight. Here's the cash. I'll take it. Fight signed, sealed, and delivered. That fighter leaves that hotel or the office or wherever he did the negotiating happier than a pig in shit. He's got a briefcase full of money. He's going to make another $500,000. He's fighting so-and-so. He feels good about the fight, and then he goes off. A month later, he finds out that Don King is making $5 million from the fight. Well, now all of a sudden, he tells everybody that he's getting ripped off, right? And that's what really started everything. Well, the truth of the matter is how is a fighter getting ripped off when you agree to a purse? The time for negotiation was prior to finding out what Don King made. It's the same in other sports. You get a football guy playing line, right? He's a lineman. He signs a 5-year deal for $5 million. 2 years into his contract, they bring in another guy, and he signs a 5-year deal for $8 million. Well, now the guy feels that he's slighted and he wants a new contract, even though he's got 3 years left on the contract. It's the same principle. The time for negotiation is before you put your name on the contract. Once that's done, you got to own up to your contract and remember it next time. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I think Alex and Dax, you guys probably remember this. Alex, you're the historian here, but Billy just described something that happened when Hasim Rahman went up to HBO and was going to re-sign, when he won. And Don, so I literally went to SunTrust Bank and got the money that he paid Hasim Rahman, because I was like Don's little bag guy. Go to the bank, they give me a check, and I'd cash it and bring the money back. One time, 3-4 times, I had $1 million in a suitcase driving from SunTrust Bank back to the office. So this time it was like $500,000 I think I had. And Don took it, and he got on an airplane, and he went up, and Isidore drove him in the limo up there, and they sat out in front of HBO. When Rahman came out, HBO said, we got to get some stuff signed, and we'll get you a check down the road and all that stuff. And Don was sitting outside HBO and got Rahman in that limo and said, "Come on over here, brother." And I got right here, click, click. And he opened up the briefcase that I got him of like $500,000 and said, "Forget them HBO guy. Did they pay you?" "No, man, they didn't." He goes, click, click, opens it up. Isidore told me the story. Click, he's in the back of the limo, clicks it open, and he's got the contract sitting on top. He goes, "It's all yours, brother. Just sign it, man. We'll do this fight together," and all that stuff. And that's how he got Rahman from HBO. And HBO was, those guys were pissed. They hated Don. But Don was just 3 steps ahead of those guys. Corporate guys waiting for a check signer, and he clicks open the thing and hands him the suitcase full of money. It was that story is just so awesome. I mean, I wish I could have been there to film it and watch it, because that was quintessential Don. He knows what these guys wanted. They wanted cash. Look, I manage his accounts receivable. You know how many boxers didn't pay Don back? I can't tell you the number, because that's Don's business, but it's a bigger accounts receivable than 95% of businesses in this country ever have in their life that is unpaid to him from boxers that didn't pay him back. More boxers ripped him off than he ever ripped anybody off, regardless of what was said. Because I read contracts, I saw what happened. I went to the fights and paid these fighters. And these guys, with their borrowing money and not paying it back, or in Mayorga's case, I went to all of Mayorga's fights pretty much to pay him. Do you know how many times I paid him? 0. You know why? Because he never had a positive balance in his account. He always had a negative. All of his purses were paying back the money he had already borrowed. Not once did I hand Mayorga a check. All those fights. Remember all those fights he had? Pay-per-views? He did? Not once did I pay him.
All those beers and cigars.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. A month before the Vargas fight, he got his arm caught in the door at the Southgate because he was drunk, and I was with him the night before. I drank 3 shots with him at the Southgate bar 30 days before that fight, smoking out on the sidewalk, and got his right arm got caught in the door. He was so drunk, and the next morning we're like, oh my God, the pay-per-view's off. Well, I guess he shook it off, and he fought, and he beat, he knocked out Vargas. You guys remember that fight. There was some crazy stuff that went on, but Don was the man who knew how to manage that stuff far better than any of these guys know how to manage their stuff now.
How do you think he would, if Don was in his prime now, or at least the 80s version of Don King? Because remember, a lot of people say ripped off fighters when the whole Tyson towel bill when Tyson was in jail. But how do you think he would have fared today with the types of fighters? I mean, even all sports. I mean, you look at these. Bill Parcells, great coach in his era. Could he have survived today with the type of athlete we have? And it's the same thing. What type of promoter Don King, we know the type of promoter he is. Would he have been able to survive with the types of fighters that are out there today?
Well, here's the thing. So when DK left the business, so I left working for him full-time in 2012, and that was really the end of his career. But he left a giant void in the boxing promotion world when he left. And whenever there's a void, just like anything, like in the I hate to use this example, Billy, no offense, but in the mob, when the mob boss dies or goes away or retires or goes to the home, there's a vacuum of power, and it's either filled by somebody who's as good as that guy that left, or it's filled by a bunch of half-ass guys who don't really know what they're doing. And I'm sad to say that that's the state of boxing right now. It's filled by a bunch of half-ass guys that don't know how to do what DK did. Aram's still out there doing his thing, but Aram was on his game because he had Don on his back the whole time. And look at those, the best fights you saw, these fights. When I started working there in 93, 94, we had 4 pay-per-view fights. The May 5th, 1994 with Chavez, the rematch with Randall. We had 5 legitimate, incredible championship fights on that card. And every one of those pay-per-views, Don said, I got to give the people what they want. Championship fights with real belts, with real guys that were undefeated or one-loss, fighting each other, who normally in this day and age would never dream of fighting each other. Julian Jackson versus Gerald McClellan, and Chavez fighting Randall in the rematch. And I just think about those fights. It blows my mind up. When's the last time you saw a fight card with even 2 legitimate championships on it with guys in the prime of their career fighting them? You don't.
You don't. And what you see is you see one-sided fights. Listen, we've talked about this, and Sal had talked about this with us on this show many, many times. The sport of boxing there were always rivalries in the sport of boxing with fighters. Sugar Ray Robinson, Jake LaMotta is one that comes to mind. You can fast forward. I mean, we had many rivalries. Even Tyson Holyfield was a rivalry, but the promoters were rivals too. It seems like we don't have the rivalries today. We have a champion. We have many champions. And then you have the mandatories. Well, we got to fight the guy. The sanctioning body's ordering this fight, and it's like, well, how did he become the number one, guy that has to fight? I mean, it's a shame. And that's one of the problems. But you're never going to fix it because the biggest thing, and I remember all of us talking about this on the show, about the difference in the sport of boxing, why it's not, because at one time boxing was the king of sports, and why it's not anymore. Because with sports like football and baseball and basketball, you're a lifelong fan. You're born into it, whether you choose to be or whether your father or grandfather or somebody else makes you. I know in my case, my kids and grandkids, they're Jets fans. Unfortunately, I've tortured them with that. But it's the way it is. We don't have lifelong boxing fans anymore. We're probably a handful of them left, or any old timers. The young fan today are a boxer fan, not a boxing fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have a favorite boxer. Floyd Mayweather retires. All those fans that he, made those millions and millions of dollars with, are they still watching? Do we have I get the Wilder, he has his loyal base. Are they a fan of the sport or just Deontay Wilder? Same thing with AJ and all these fighters, and that's the biggest problem. We don't have boxing fans. We have boxer fans. What do you guys think?
Yeah. The thing with Don is he was so dominant that now the UFC, what a lot of people don't realize is the UFC took to the internet first, before we had Wi-Fi, before there was Twitter and Facebook.
No, LDL TV and Talking Boxing with Billy C took the internet first.
They had to go to the internet first, and they actually used stuff on the dark web because, remember, Senator John McCain, before they really got organized, called it human cockfighting. And nobody would broadcast them. They didn't have any networks. They had no contracts. So they used to have to either do direct-to-video or they would use the internet, and they would use their own websites. Now, Don King, being so dominant, remember, even back in the early 2000s, Don was putting on these great cards. You talk about money at cards. Now, I remember when owned the gym up in Schenectady, getting a call on December, I think it was like the 2nd or 3rd, from somebody saying that Cedric Kushner needs a ring and can't find one. There was a card over in at the Pepsi Arena. Hasim Rothman was fighting on the card. That's before Hasim Rothman got any before he became a name, and they had some local guys. Carl Daniels, the former cruiserweight champion, put on there, passed his best, and so we rent the thing out. And I remember going in the back and Cedric Kushner opening up this briefcase full of money and paying everybody in cash. But those days are gone, and you talk about with the how guys blame Don King anytime, and you're right, John. Anytime people mention Don King, you mention somebody who doesn't know any better. First, he was a crook. He did this one to that one, and this one to that one. I remember Matt Baranski telling me when I was a kid, even before he lost to Buster Douglas, that he said Mike is going to lose because Mike kept calling him from Japan. And then I remember him telling me a story about 1993. I wasn't even old enough to drink yet. And he's telling me a story about, Mike spent all his time in his room because he had all his followers with him, the hangers-on. Remember what a fiasco that was with the glove for the ice thing and that. And he said all these Japanese people, they had never seen Mike Tyson before. They wanted to see him out there. So what they're doing is they're just camped outside the hotel, and all the Mike Tyson hanger-ons are signing his name onto little hotel towels and throwing them out the window. He said if any two people were to compare the signatures and realize no two matched, but they threw tens of thousands of them out there. The hotel had to actually order more, and then they're throwing more stuff out there. And Mike has no idea any of this is going on because Mike is locked in his room. He just did not want to be bothered. He had that bald spot because he's pulling hairs out of his head. And then all of a sudden it was Don's fault. Don got ripped off because the hotel wanted to be reimbursed, and Don had to come out of his pocket. And then all of a sudden it was Don's fault because the hotel had jacked up the price, and Don was paying. And however, Don probably added a few dollars onto whatever they were charging. I think I heard something. It was like anywhere between $75 and $100 per hand towel that Tyson got charged. But it was just the fact of it's the business side, and like you say, it's pay attention. How do you think nobody's going to sit there and go broke? And you're grown. You're not going to have a babysitter now. You're in a business. And if you're going to have follow around, they're the guys that hurt you worse than anything.
Alex, October 9th, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder 3. What do you think Sal would have thought about this fight?
I don't know. I think he'd be looking forward to it only because I think, like a lot of us, it's hard not to want to see what the heavyweights do. And like we've said earlier, I think he did like Deontay Wilder because I think the same reason everybody is sort of fascinated by him is it's just an incredible amount of power that he has, and that equalizer. It's, you never know what's going to happen. I don't know what he would have, what his prediction would have been, but personally, I think that Fury wins again, and I don't know if he wins easier than the last time because the layoff he's had has been tremendous. But I look to him to win a convincing third fight.
Well, a lot of times fighters have another fighter's number. And I ask about that, John, because, Sal did like Deontay for a while, loved his punching power, tried to give him some credit. He respected Mark Breland as a trainer. After the second Fury fight, it was obvious that Wilder wasn't going to beat Tyson Fury again, ever. I think that, if they fight 100 times, I think Fury wins at least 99. I think that Sal, and this is just my opinion, I think Sal would have said basically what I just said, that he would think that Wilder's going to lose again. I as many people that support Deontay Wilder feel they bought into the excuses and they feel his punching power is going to carry him through because he can hurt Fury. Fury can be knocked out. He hasn't yet, but he shows that he could. But the fact that Fury is facing a guy in Wilder who's a one-trick pony and knows this and has been in the ring with him, actually, 2 fights already, I think Sal would have admitted that there's no way that Wilder wins this fight. I mean, what do you think, John?
I actually had a discussion with Sal, and I said, I had this discussion over and over with Sal about fighters. You know how there are those fighters, and you guys, the historians, know this better, but there's that defining fight where a fighter, his career is over, but he fights on and on and on. Meldrick Taylor getting knocked out by Chavez. I think Meldrick Taylor's career was over at that point. There have been other guys. I think Roy Jones, when he got knocked out by Tarver, that was it, and he should have quit right there. I said to Sal, do you think that this beating that Deontay Wilder took and the subsequent denial of what happened and the way he got beat, so decisively and was just dismantled like he's never been, a guy with all these wins and knockouts. And I said, Sal, do you think he's shot? And I remember Sal specifically saying, maybe, John, maybe he's shot. I said, and we might not find out in the next fight. It might, like Meldrick Taylor went on. I remember Meldrick Taylor fought all the way to the end of when he fought Chavez again, I think in September of '94, years after that loss. And he was clearly a shot fighter. And then when Meldrick Taylor, when I saw him we picked him up in the airport in the car, and he was completely punch drunk. And all I could think about was that knockout. I think Sal agreed that there's a possibility that knockout that happened to Wilder changed him and finished him forever. And I don't even know in this rematch, this third fight, if you're going to see whether that happened or not. If Fury knocks him out again in the same fashion, that will confirm what I believe to happen right now. I think that Wilder is a shot fighter. That's what I think, based on the way he acted. Watch that fight again. When I watched it again, I went, wow, that was a real beatdown that guy took. And psychologically, he was not able to handle it with all the crazy excuses and firing Breland and all the other stuff that he did. And I think Sal was on that board with me. I mean, I said to him, I go, you think he's shot? And Sal said, yeah, maybe he is shot. Maybe he's done.
But the big reason with Wilder, And it took Sal a little while to recognize this because he was infatuated with the guy's punching power. And it is freakish. There's no question. No, I mean, you can't deny that. But what happened to Wilder happens to a lot of fighters. You get people in their ear telling you how great you are. You start to believe it. He never really learned how to fight. He's got no leg footwork. He had a jab in one fight. Now they're saying, well, he's got a good trainer. Malik Scott, that was the fight that, the guy laid down for him. You're telling me that Malik Scott's a better trainer than Mark Breland? The problem is fighters aren't allowed to develop inside the ring with other fighters. Everybody's trying to protect the O. That's something that is drastically different with the sport of boxing today of how it was. And you could make the argument that it's safer this way, et cetera, et cetera. For the A side, the B side guys are getting pounded. They become that opponent. In Deontay Wilder's defense, here's a guy that has one thing. He's a one-trick pony. That's it. He's got punching power. That's what he's going to rely on. He's going to rely on it again with Fury. He's going to hope for that knockout. And let's face it, and we all know this. Tyson Fury, yeah, he's a big guy. Yeah, has the skill set of a boxer, but he does not have the punching power of a 7'4" man. I'm sorry, he doesn't. He's not known to give beatings like he gave to Deontay Wilder. But when you can't defend because you don't have defense, and you can't move out of the way of a punch because you have no footwork, and all you're doing is headhunting with your sledgehammer of a right hand, and you're facing a guy with boxing knowledge like Tyson Fury, you're never going to beat him, ever. Deontay Wilder never fought a tough fight before Fury. Who did he beat? We can't say... Come on, John. Stavern personally. This guy. Come on. We all gave Wilder credit when he beat Stavern, but who was Stavern? Who did he fight and win? He was embarrassing when he came back for the rematch, and then he was embarrassing again when he tried to make another comeback. And we all know for a fact that he wasn't even training or anything. So. It's a shame. It's a shame, but nonetheless, we're off a little topic here. Sal, I know, John, you're going to be. You have a link available for people that would like to witness the funeral. Could you want to talk about that?
Sure. There's a link on ldltv.com, salsenecola.com, southerngourmetspice.com. The LDL TV live channel, and I think did you push a link out on your page?
I'm going to take your link to the YouTube. I'll put it on the front of BillyCBoxing.com.
Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere.
So people can check that out.
What about the tribute video, John? Post that onto the website?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'll send it to you, Billy. But it's on my LDL TV live YouTube page. It's on Sal's page on his Facebook right now. It's a whole bunch of places.
Yeah, I just remember me and Bill were talking the other night, and Bill was saying he wanted to get that like on the corner of the website to.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'll send it. I'll send you send me that link, and I'll send it to Dax, and he can put it on the site. So, okay. But listen, we're gonna, my final thoughts. I'm gonna miss Sal immensely as a friend and obviously as a co-host of the show. Because of Sal, we, when he got sick and he couldn't be part of the show, when you add that to the state of the sport, I'll be honest, and I know Alex and I have talked about it, I just couldn't get into it. It wasn't the same anymore. It's certainly never going to be the same without Sal, but I feel that I owe it to Sal to continue with the show on a regular basis, only because I know how much he loved to do it. And, I think that's reawakening my own feelings about the show and the sport. And I know Sal's looking down on us right now, and I want to thank him for doing that, because it is something I love. And, I'm going to miss Sal a lot. So if you guys have any final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to say to his family, especially his two sons, who just had a real affection for Sal. His younger son, Nicky, looked like Sal, was an athlete like Sal, and I know those guys are just terribly upset. To Lisa, who is his ex-wife, but took care of him. She said to me in that interview I did with him there a year and a half ago, I said to her, Lisa, thank you so much for taking care of Sal. She said, look, we're Italian, we're family, we'll always be family. I'm taking care of this guy as long as he needs me to take care of him. And that was like, when she said that to me, I was like, wow, what a person. So Lisa, just want to thank her for everything she did, taking care of his business, getting him to his appointments, driving him. She drove him down to this Christy Martin fight to do commentary. That was the last fight he did commentary on with the cane and everything. To his family, his extended family, his brother, who I've talked with this week. Really sorry for your loss. It was a big loss on the boxing side, on the pizza side, on the human side. And, I'll miss Sal forever. I mean, I miss the guy already. But R.I.P. Sal.
Yeah. Well, hey, Dax and Alex, I'm glad you sat in with us, and we'll be back next week. We're going to be doing the show, and we'll talk to you then, all right?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jack. My condolences to everybody, and thanks very much for letting me be a part of it.
All right, brother. Thanks. Well, John, Dax and Alex, obviously a big part of the show, and we will be continuing doing the show now. Like I said, I feel I owe it to Sal. But in any event, I really appreciate you coming on, and we're going to end the show right now, but don't go anywhere, John. I want to thank everybody for joining us right now, and look on our website and go to ldltv.com for if you want to be part or at least witness the funeral services for Sal. And if you didn't see the tribute John put together for Sal Rocky Senecola, it's great. And I too want to mention and thank Lisa. I was shocked the first time Sal told me. I was talking to him, and he says, well, Lisa's here taking care of me. And I said, Lisa? I'll be honest. It was, they had there was some rocky times there towards the end. Well, not towards the end, but prior to that. And he said, yeah, she's been great. And he was sincere. And although I never really got to talk with Lisa much, I like you, I really respected her, and I give her a lot of credit for putting whatever she had to put aside and really came through for both Sal and the boys, because I'm sure that they're going through some stuff right now too. So for everybody watching and listening, thanks for joining us. I wanted to do a tribute to Sal, but like I said, you don't want to miss the tribute video that John and LDL TV put together. And check out ldltv.com, or like you heard Dax say, he'll post it up on BillyCBoxing.com. Thanks, and tune in next time.